Hello, and welcome to Holy Trinity Church, Dacre Banks, for this collective worship. I'm thinking this morning about the Christian value of justice and how that might relate to some of the things that we buy every day, or sometimes at special times. I've got a few things down here that I'm going to show you. I'm going to get you up a little bit closer and show you these things more closely, and then we're going to have a look at all sorts of other things to think about justice and what that might mean for us in our daily lives. Right, now, I wonder if anybody has seen anything like this before. Where is it? It's a little badge, and it says down the bottom, Fair Trade. I will show you some of these other things on here. This is a jar of coffee. And you see that little, there it is, down there in the corner, that little symbol. And it says at the bottom of it, Fair Trade. And it's got a little person sort of waving their hand in a kind of funny circle and colour. Also says, what is that, Rainforest Rescue. There's a little thing down there. But you can find that little Fair Trade sign on quite a number of things. Here, on an ordinary packet of Maltesers, which you might like to eat, there down the bottom, not in colour this time, but it's the same symbol. It says Fair Trade on it. And this is sugar. Fair Trade. One or two other things here are not quite the same, but similar. If you look on the back of this packet of mini eggs, it says, there's a little thing there, I don't know if you can see it very well, probably not. It says Cocoa Life, and then partnering with Fair Trade Foundation. Down the bottom in the corner there. If you look at a lot of the things you can buy, you can find things like that. Here's an Easter egg. It's a bit late now, isn't it, really? But this is, on the back of that, it doesn't have Fair Trade at all. It does have a little sign there saying Rainforest Alliance. But I'll explain that when we get to it in a bit. All of these items have certification marks on to show that they've come from places that try and look after the people who make them. And we'll find out what that means in a moment. But fair trade means the people who are making the things at the other end, if you're making chocolate, the cocoa growers in Africa or other parts of the world, are getting a fair price, fair trade for the things that they sell. The coffee bean growers are getting a fair price. Fair trade means it's fair. The sugar producers get a fair price, because sometimes in the world they don't. I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, and then I'll explain about some of the things that might make the world unfair. Now, first I'm going to bring you over here and make you look one side, and I'll talk to you about this side over here. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see me, but it doesn't really matter, as long as you can hear the story. Right. Now, once upon a time, this is an old story from Sri Lanka, actually, an island south of India. Once upon a time, there was an old man who had two sons, and all he had in the world to give to his two sons, one older, one younger, was his apple tree, his cow, and his blanket. But he only had two sons. He thought, how can I share this out fairly? He wasn't a very wise man, but he did share it out. And when the old man died, they found his will, a piece of paper, and then written on it, he said, to my older son, I leave the top half of the apple tree, and to my younger son, I leave the bottom half. To my older son, I leave the back half of the cow, and to my younger son, I leave the pretty end, the front half. My older son can have the blanket at night, and my younger son can have the blanket during the day. And that should be fair. And the old man had died, and the sons shared the things out as his will had said. But it didn't work out very well, because the younger son had the bottom half of the tree, which meant he had to dig around it and fertilise it and water it all the time, look after the bottom half of the tree, whereas the older son got the top half of the tree and he got all the apples. The younger son got the front half of the cow, the pretty end, but that was the end that needed feeding and taking to water and looking after, whereas the back end of the cow produced the milk and the manure as well, which was very useful in that country for putting on crops and things like that. During the night, the older son got the blanket and he could wrap it around himself to keep warm and go to sleep within. During the day, the younger son got the blanket when it needed washing and cleaning, so it was ready for the next night. Now, that didn't seem to work out very well, because the older son got all the apples, the older son got all the milk and all the manure for his crops, and at night the older son could sleep warm and comfortable while the younger son was cold. The younger son grew weaker and weaker because he wasn't getting much to eat anymore. The older son grew bigger and stronger because he had plenty to eat. But the younger son said, "This isn't fair, brother. We're going to have to share this out differently, because it's not fair. I'm doing all the work and you're getting all the food." But the older brother rather liked it like that, and he said, "That was in Father's will. I want to keep it like that." And because he was now bigger and stronger than his younger brother, the younger brother couldn't really do anything about it anyway, so he had to carry on that way, and he grew slowly thinner and weaker, until he decided, why should I do this? He gave up watering and digging round the bottom half of the tree. He gave up feeding and taking the front half of the cow to water. He gave up washing the blanket and looking after it. And so what happened? The tree died and stopped producing apples. The cow grew thin and stopped producing milk. The blanket grew dirty and mouldy and smelly, and the older son didn't want to sleep in it anymore. And so it all went wrong. Now, you might think that was rather stupid, and on one level, I guess it probably is. But let us have a little bit of a think about justice in the world. Remember justice, what it means? It's about fairness. It's about things being fair. Now, how am I going to show you all of these things? There we go. Let's try this. I might have to move you around for this one. You don't need to see me, do you? There you go. Now, here we have a banana. We have some real bananas here that you might buy. Oh, my bag's fallen down. You might buy them from the supermarket, Mr. Morrison there, or any other sort of shop. You might buy some bananas. And this here is about how these bananas come to you, how they end up in the supermarket in the first place. First of all, so somebody has to grow the bananas. There's a banana plantation there, a picture. And they all grow upside down, look. I always thought they would dangle the other way around, but no, they don't. They grow pointing upwards. But they take quite a lot of hard work to grow bananas. There, we've got a spade for digging around the plants, a saw for cutting off the dead branches, for looking after them, some gloves, it's heavy and hard work, sprays to keep the pests off the crop that might eat them and damage the crop. And it takes 9 months to grow a crop of bananas. So the farmer, the grower, the banana farmer, has to work very hard to produce the bananas. But he does. And then the bananas have to get to us. How does that happen? Well, first, they go to a packer. There's a box, a fruit box. The packer, he needs to produce the boxes, and he needs to carefully pack the fruit in boxes so they can be shipped around the world without going bad. And they need to be carefully packed and packaged so that they keep good for long enough to get to you and me, who will want to eat them. And how do they get to us? Well, normally, you would send them by boat. There is an enormous container ship there. And a ship owner has these ships, and he will transport carefully the bananas so that they come across the world into our country. All this is paid for by the importer, a multinational company, and to import something is to buy something into a country. You import it. If you export it, you're sending it out of the country. An importer is usually a multinational company or a very rich person or company, and they pay the money, they organise the whole thing. They buy the money and they organise the whole chain of growing, packing, shipping and everything. And then they send the food to a wholesaler. You see this is an enormous warehouse there. You see those forklift trucks going up and down, and and there are, well, miles and miles of boxes of fruit, and there'll be bananas in there somewhere. The wholesaler is the company that owns the warehouse and who, again, has to look after the fruit and make sure it keeps good, package it, store it in the right temperatures and things. And then the shopkeepers, be it a little shop, like our corner shop, or Mr. Morrison himself, the big supermarkets, or whatever the big supermarkets are, they buy them from the wholesaler, put them on the shelves, and then we go and buy them. Now, which of those do you think get the most money for producing the bananas? Well, I'll show you. Here we go. I'm going to turn my banana around. Just have to stick my blue tack around. Excuse me while I fiddle for just a moment. Won't take long. There we go. One banana that's divided up into sections. One of these groups gets 2p, one another gets 3, 3, 2, 3, and one gets 7. Now, what do you think would be fair? Who should get the most for growing this banana? Who's done the most work? Well, I mean, they've all done some work. They all deserve something. But growing bananas for 9 months in the hot sun, or all the other things. And how do you think that money is divided up? If that banana costs 20p, one of these bananas costs 20p, I don't know how much they cost these days, I think they're probably a little bit more than that now. Well, the grower gets 2p for every banana grown. I mean, he grows thousands of bananas, so he will get quite a lot of money eventually, but he has to spend half of that money on looking after the banana plants, buying new plants for next season because they might get blown down in strong winds, more spray, more tools. So he only gets to keep about 1p of that 2p. The packer would get about 3p for every banana. The ship owner, about 3p for every banana, assuming they cost 20p. Probably a little more nowadays. The importer, he would take 2p for every one of the thousands of millions of bananas that he gets, shipped from different farmers all over the world. The wholesaler will get 3p for looking after them in his big warehouse and selling them on to the shopkeeper, usually the supermarket, who will get 7p. Now, I'm not saying there's a right answer to this, but do you think that's fair? I mean, it's fair that everybody can make some money. The shopkeeper certainly needs to make his money as well. But really, should the grower get 2p and have to spend half of it on looking after the plants? Shouldn't they get a little bit more? Fair trade is about trying to make sure this whole process is fair. Now, I'm just going to come down and talk to you again for a moment. Now, justice is about fairness, making sure the world is fair, and Christians care about, everyone. But when we think about the people at the bottom of the chain over there, the growers who grew those bananas, often they are very poor. Often they struggle to make a living, even though they work very, very hard. Now, if you see a fair trade mark on your banana, or on anything else, like very often you see it in coffee, tea, chocolate, sugar, some of the things I've got there, but you can see it on other things as well, wine and fruit juice, clothes, even there you can get fair trade cotton. If you see that fair trade mark on something, it's a guarantee that the person, the grower, has got a fair price. Now, if you were to buy a fair trade banana, it might cost you 22p. It will cost a bit more. They're difficult to find these days. I was looking for some, I couldn't find one. I'll explain about that other symbol in a moment. But the grower might get 4p. And then for all his hundreds of thousands of bananas, that means actually he's making a good living. double what he might have been making if nobody had sorted out fair trade. So some growers work for fair trade companies, fair trade plantations, and they look after their growers and workers to try and make it fair, to try and sort out justice. There are other ways of doing things like that as well. These certifications are often about good things. I'll just show you this one a little more closely. Here we go. Because I couldn't find any fair trade bananas. They're difficult to find these days. Where are we? There, you see that little frog? There, that says Rainforest Alliance. That's the next best thing to fair trade. Fair trade makes sure that grower gets a fair price. That's what it's about. Rainforest Alliance is about making sure that the growers and everybody look after the rainforest and the environment and make sure it's good. And in the end, it ought to make sure they get a bit of a fairer price as well, but that doesn't guarantee it necessarily. So there are different things like that. And, well, to be a Christian is to be someone who's concerned about justice, fairness for everybody. And so a Christian might well think about the things they buy. You can't do it all the time. Lots of things don't have a fair trade mark at all. And not everything you buy you'll be able to find it for. But if you spot that fair trade mark, then often a Christian will decide, I'm going to get that one instead of that one. Even though it's a bit more expensive, it might cost me a bit more, but because I care about those people in Africa or South America or wherever it is they're growing the bananas. And if you look after what you buy in that way, you can actually make a difference to the world. In a small way, but all those small ways add up. Because we don't want the world to be like our funny Sri Lankan story. Because if the growers never get a fair price for their bananas, if they're like the guy who had to water the tree but never really got to eat much of its fruit, who got to feed the cow but never got much of the milk, who had to wash the blanket but never got to sleep in it. If the grower's life was like that, if they're too poor, they struggle, they're going to stop growing bananas and we won't have bananas at all. So justice is important. Right, there's a few of our fair traded things again there. Oh, that Easter egg I showed you at the beginning. Now, this is made by a company called Nestle. They make Kit Kats and quite a lot of other chocolates and things. They don't do fair trade. They do the Rainforest Alliance thing. At least it says the cocoa is done through the Rainforest Alliance. But they also get into trouble in Nestle because the growers of their cocoa for the chocolate are often have children working for very little money. So sometimes people go the other way and they say, actually, I'm not going to buy anything from Nestle because of the way they treat their workers. But actually, they're getting better because people, like Christians, say, I'm not going to buy your things anymore because you're treating your workers badly, you're treating the growers badly. But now they're starting to get a bit better and they've got this Rainforest Alliance mark there, so there's time to do a bit better. So I'm not saying don't eat Nestle or anything, but I am saying perhaps we should think about the things we buy and the things we eat. Fair trade is all about that. Right, I'm going to finish with a song. I did this song last time I did one of these collective worships for you. It's called When I Needed a Neighbour, Were You There? Were you able, when the person who's poor needs a neighbour, are we going to be the one who helps them, who looks after them? When the banana growers are not making enough to live on, are we going to be a neighbour to them that help care for them? And the song says, when I needed a neighbour, were you there? Were you there? And it says, and the creed and the colour and the name won't matter. Were you there? Were you helping? Were you in any way you could? The creed, that creed means what you believe. So it doesn't matter if they're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu. The creed, what they believe doesn't matter. God loves them and we do our best to care for them, to be their neighbours. Jesus said, love your neighbour as yourself. was one of the greatest commandments that God gives in his word. When I needed a neighbour, were you there? When I needed a neighbour, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a neighbour, were you there? And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? Were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, were you there? I was cold, I was naked, were you there? Were you there? I was cold, I was naked, were you there? And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, were you there? When I needed a shelter, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a shelter, were you there? And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, were you there? When I needed a healer, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a healer, were you there? And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, were you there? Wherever you travel, I'll be there, I'll be there. Wherever you travel, I'll be there. And the creed and the colour and the name won't matter, I'll be there. Let's finish with a short prayer. Dear God, we thank you that you love us all as your children, everyone throughout the world. Teach us to love one another as Jesus taught, to be fair to one another, to be concerned about justice, to think about the things that we buy and who produce them and whether they're getting a fair price. Help us to be mindful of all your children, to love them as you do. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all. Goodbye for now. Have a good day.